In the middle of the 2008 recession, I remember wondering, how are they going to clean up this mess? Who's going to reform the financial system that's broken? And little did I know that it was actually going to be all of us. It wasn't just going to be federal policy, top down, but actually technology, bottom up. And it's called equity crowdfunding. And what it lets you do is invest directly into businesses and buildings in your city, and fundamentally changes the power dynamics of what gets built and who builds it. The story starts with me leaving a big real estate development company and starting a small neighborhood development company with my brother. We wanted to work in the neighborhoods that we lived in, renovate vacant buildings down the street from us, open new restaurants and retail in neglected parts of the city that people really hadn't given much love to since the 60s. And we saw all of our friends moving into these areas. It was a generational shift of where people wanted to live, and we wanted to be part of that. When we were buying our first property in H Street Northeast, which is like the Brooklyn of Washington, D.C., I remember going across town or up to New York to meet with wealthy investment advisors or investment companies who looked at me crossways when I told them what we were going to do and, more importantly, where we were going to do it. Most of them had never been to H Street Northeast. Some of them had never heard of it. And so it felt very like a juxtaposition, right? Why would you be raising money from people who didn't care about this neighborhood? On the other hand, everybody in the neighborhood was very excited about what we were doing. It was obvious what was happening to anybody who lived there, and the opportunity that we saw, the vision that we had, was the vision everyone else had who lived in that same area. And so, on one hand, you have a community, a customer, a resident who's excited about what we were doing. On the other hand, you had sort of typical money sources that didn't know what we were talking about. And it made us realize that most people don't know how commercial real estate is owned and funded. So let me ask you a question. So picture yourself in your city or your neighborhood, and there's buildings all around you. Who owns your environment? Who profits from the places you go to? Who builds your city? The short answer is not you, and probably not anybody you know. And that's a strange notion, because 100 years ago, everything that you invested in was local, and now nearly nothing is. And local people, local families used to own the local real estate. People who were invested in the community used to be part of the decision-making of what got built. So how did this happen? Well, interestingly, much of it dates back to the last financial debacle in the late 1980s. It's called the savings and loan crisis. And the savings and loans crisis was the largest real estate failure in the history of the United States at that time, totaling $400 billion in bad assets, which used to be a lot of money. So the private capital markets had dried up, and financial innovators at that period figured out that if they gathered the real estate into pools, they could access public markets and pension funds. And these pools came to be known as private equity funds and real estate investment trusts. And the idea really worked. So in the early 90s, there were very few private equity funds or any public real estate investment trusts. And 20 years later, they own and control almost $1 trillion in local real estate. And if people wonder who makes the decisions and how things who profits from them, the answer is here. Now, there were a lot of benefits to this, right? That a lot more capital came into the real estate industry, but there were a lot of unintended consequences when institutional capital took over this industry. So what it did was it disconnected the people who live there, people who are the investors, from actually what they're investing in. Created a long supply chain of how money flowed into assets, and it turned real estate into a commodity like a bond, as opposed to a place that has meaning and has a sense of connection to people who live there. And so this sort of sets up basically what our big idea was. It dawned on us, what if you just went direct? What if you made the people who were excited about what we were doing our partner? And we raised our money from the local residents and neighbors. Well, that was easier said than done, because in 2010, the regulations from the past 100 years said that wasn't possible. Basically, you couldn't raise money from everybody and anybody without going public, like on the New York Stock Exchange, like an IPO. We went to lawyer after lawyer after lawyer asking them, how do we raise money from everybody and anybody? Not just wealthy accredited investors, but actually people who live in a neighborhood who could invest as low as $100. And people told us it was basically impractical, infeasible, impossible. Finally, we got a meeting with one of the most prestigious law firms in the country. This firm does the work for most of the major top investment banks. And I remember going up to New York to a skyscraper in Times Square. And we went to the top of the skyscraper's conference room looking over the New York horizon. And I was feeling very powerful at that moment. I think that's the intention. So we're looking over the horizon, and I'm telling them what we want to do, and I'm wondering how do we do it. And at the end of the meeting, there's just dead silence, and the guy says to me, why would you want to bother with the little people? And I was sort of taken aback, so I had to retort, because you're getting screwed by Wall Street. And he said to me, well, that's your opinion. So this is the middle of 2010, right? So I thought, really, is it just my opinion? So serendipitously, a few weeks later, I was sitting with a friend who worked at the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, and I was telling him what we wanted to do, and he said, hey, why didn't you ask earlier? My friend, I know this guy who's a guru. He knows everything about this type of stuff. If he says it's possible, you can do it. If he says it's not possible, you can't. And I thought, a guru, really? Now I find out? But I got nervous after that because I realized, what if he said it wasn't possible? So I got a meeting with him, we sat down, and he was not what I expected. He was big, and he was warm, and he was friendly. And after telling him what we wanted to do, he said to me, of course you can do that. I wrote those regs in the 1990s. So away we went. It still wasn't easy, but now that you had a plan of what to do, it felt different. I remember the first time I got on the phone with the securities regulators and said we wanted to sell shares of one building online, everybody and anybody, at $100 a unit. They were nonplussed. But they worked with us. We went back and forth, and finally we got it cleared. It took 9 months, and ultimately our offering weighed 12 pounds. But we made it happen. Coincidentally, during that same time period, I had a baby that weighed 8 pounds. So just to give you it was a real undertaking. We could put it on the internet, and the first offering raised $325,000 from 175 local people. And then we did it again and raised $350,000 from 361 people. And then we did it again. The first time it took 3 months to raise $325,000. By the third time, we had that much interest in 2 hours. And I think that's because it's intuitive. Imagine if you could invest down the street from where you live and transform a building that you care about and actually see your money at work and own something tangible. One of our investors, Micah, told me that he invested $100 and showed the building to his mom and dad. Right? That's what I'm talking about. What I'm describing right now is the exception. It's not the norm. But soon it will be, because Congress and the Obama administration passed a bipartisan bill, which is amazing, that will make what we're doing a lot faster, a lot easier. It's called the Jobs Act. And it's going to fundamentally transform how the financial sector works. It will let technology get at capital the way it got at commerce and media. What Twitter and blogs did to newspapers and Amazon.com did to Borders Books, maybe crowdfunding can do to Wall Street. Right. It's not just an idea, too. We're doing it actually down the street. And this is a big project. They have about $1 million soft circled in Portland, Oregon now, and also in Philadelphia. It's amazing because if you think about it, all of a sudden you're going to have this power too. You're going to have this power, invest in your neighborhood, and build your own city. And my question to you is, what will you build? Are you going to build a bookstore, a bakery, a skyscraper, daycare center, maybe affordable housing? All of a sudden, the dynamics change. It's a lot like what Wikipedia did to encyclopedias. If I said to you 10 years ago that people would write their own encyclopedia, they'll build the largest encyclopedia in the history of mankind, and basically eliminate encyclopedias as we knew them, you would have said, I'm crazy. Well, 10 years from now, people will be building their own cities. The way people crowdsource fundamentally is going to change how cities get built. Mayor Giuliani has this idea that he credits to helping rebuild inner-city New York in the 1990s. It's called the broken windows theory. And the theory went, if you fix the broken windows and you clean up the spray paint, the neighborhood will look better, so people would treat it better. So what happens when people own their neighborhood, own their city? How will they treat it then? What if people could build the city they want to live in? What would it feel like to live in that city? Well, my bet is we're all going to find out. Thanks.